even though maybe you have not been in the investment class, hopefully you'll get something from it. I've asked, I don't know what they're doing out there with the young people, but I'm hoping some more of our high school kids could come this week and next in particular. This is really cut out for that age bracket, as far as if you want to plan ahead, do it when you're young. And so I hope that some of them do show up. I see some wandering out there, so I don't know. But so we're going to start off with prayer, and then I'm going to look in the Bible. You can go to the book of James if you want to, chapter 4. Look at some biblical principles here that we should look at, and then we will go into some more investing ideas here. Okay? So James chapter 4. Should be on my thing here. I don't know why it's not. Let's see something here. It's not. Interesting. I don't know. What have I done? What have I done? I'm going to have to start over this thing. All right. Sorry about this. I pushed the wrong button, so I'm going to start over, looks like. Well, okay, we'll keep working on this. I did something wrong, and I'm on all the wrong stuff here. Okay, I'm back on chart. Okay, so look at with me at James chapter 4. I want to look at some biblical principles and involving investments. God speaks about these things, believe it or not, and gives us some wise counsel. So let's pray. Father, we pray for this evening that we can learn some things together that are helpful, and that'll be even going along with this morning's message concerning giving. We can't give if we don't have. So we want to be able to have resources to give to your work and your ministry, your purposes in this world today. So, Lord, help us to gain these insights today from your word and from practical ideas. In Jesus' name, amen. So let's look at a few biblical principles. Number one, James chapter 4. As you think about finances in the future, don't presume on the future. Don't presume on the future. James chapter 4. And verse 13, come now, you say, today or tomorrow, we'll go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit, yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. So we have, you don't know what the future is. Bob, could you move on in about 3 seats and you guys can have, so when you guys come in and take the end seats, that make it difficult. We have to pick on you a little bit. So give some room. Move over about 3 more seats, Bob. Come on, man. Don't be stingy. Man, you're stubborn. I got to look at a passage of scripture on stubbornness now. Okay. His choice? All right. Anyway, don't presume on the future. So you think things are going to be a certain way. They may not be. You know, I'm sure you've been watching some of the news stuff on the fire out in California. That's just tragic, and it just kind of breaks your heart to even watch something like this. None of those people thought anything like that would happen, but we don't know what will happen. Crises and tragedies happen, so we don't presume in the future. James talks about that. And then secondly, go to Proverbs chapter 28. Proverbs has is God's book of wisdom as far as practical living is concerned. And there's so much in Proverbs about so many subjects, including money. So chapter 28 of Proverbs, avoid speculation and hasty investments. Chapter 28, verse 20 says this, a faithful man will abound with blessing, but he who makes haste to be rich will not go unpunished. So one of the principles that most people, a lot of people miss, is that the old get rich quick ideas and schemes. So everybody wants to get rich in a hurry, and they're willing to speculate and do some strange things to do that. Most people lose their shirt to do that when they do that. Most day traders, if you know anything about day traders, most of them make no money at all. They usually lose money. Most people that speculate in Bitcoin and whatever else are going to lose their shirts long term. The picture of Scripture is work hard, save money, and put it away. So speculation and hasty investments, gambling in particular, is a bad choice. Then another thing Proverbs talks about a lot in chapter 22, verse 26 to 27, is don't assume somebody else's debt. Don't co-sign a loan in particular here. 22:26. Do not be among those who strike hands in a pledge, and among those who become grantors for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should he take your bed from under you? So you sign up for somebody else's debts, you co-sign a loan, they can't pay, and it comes back on you. Then you're liable for that, and people have lost a lot in doing those kinds of things. Proverbs talks about this on numerous occasions. Chapter 11, verse 15, chapter 17, verse 18, probably another dozen times. Apparently, it seems very kind and gracious to say, well, this person doesn't have the wherewithal to do such and such, and you do, so you're going to help them out and co-sign that loan. But that just doesn't work out. It can be disastrous, let's put it that way. So be very careful with that, especially if you don't have the resources to cover those kinds of debts. If you're going to co-sign a loan for somebody buying a car, the car is $20,000, but you only have $10,000, and they can't pay, and it comes back on you. What are you going to do? That could be very disastrous when something like that happens. And then go over to Luke chapter 14, verse 28. This is in a different context, more in context of following Christ, but it does fit the general picture. Evaluate the risk before you step in. Make sure you study carefully and calculate carefully the risk that you're taking on. Again, like this is really in the context of following Christ, but it says in verse 28, for which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? So make sure you have studied hard and know that you have the resources to do what you want to do. Don't take the chance of going out, getting a loan. This is where a lot of people get in trouble today. They're getting loans, they're getting credit card deals and whatever, in which they really can't pay if things don't go well. If things turn sour for them, they lose a job, have bad string of health, they don't have any means to pay. And so people get in big trouble with that. One more I would mention, chapter 6, verse 31 of Matthew 6:31. I've got a couple more actually, I'm sorry. So Matthew 6:31, avoid investments that are going to cause you anxiety. I'm going to get around to this in a moment about risk, how much risk you should take. But 6:31 of Matthew, do not worry then, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear for clothing? So don't put yourself in a position where you're going to have to be wondering if you can even feed yourself and clothe yourself and so forth. Jesus, again, in a different context, is telling us that we can trust him, but at the same time, we don't test God. We don't put ourselves out on a limb where God has to rescue us in order for us to survive. That's not trusting the Lord. That's taking advantage of the Lord's goodness. So don't do that. And if you can't sleep at night, I'll get to this in a minute. If you can't sleep at night with something you've invested in, then you shouldn't be investing in it. But I'll look at that with risk in just a moment. Two more biblical principles over in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. 1 Timothy 6:17. And this chapter is involved with money. And here it is, never trust in riches. Command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty or to set their hope on the uncertainty of riches, but on God who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. So one of the great principles of Scripture, you can never trust riches. You can't trust anything in this life. Ultimately, you can only trust in Him. And so don't put your hope on your riches. They may very well fail you. So our trust should be in Him and not in our riches. One more verse, Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, talks about diversification. So this is not just a financial principle that has been invented in recent days. We find it all the way back in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 11, verses 1 and 2. Solomon writes, "Cast your bread on the surface of the waters, for you will find it after many days. Divide your portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what calamity may occur on the earth." So the old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Well, that's basically what it's saying here. If you put everything you've got into one investment, into one entity or whatever, and it goes belly up, you're done for. So diversification is always wise when it comes to your finances as well as virtually everything else in life. So these are some of the principles that are applicable to finances as we think about investing. Okay, so those are biblical principles. Let's look at some practical investment advice, some ideas. I passed out. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this right now. I know when I was gone, Mom and Diane, there's 2 seats right up here in the second row. Would be just perfect places for you. Jim covered insurance when I was gone a few weeks ago. So this is just a worksheet. I don't know if you gave him anything like this or not, Jim. But so a lot of times people say, well, how much insurance do I need? We're talking mainly here about life insurance. So you really do need insurance on your house and your car and other things. But usually we're talking about life insurance and what kind of insurance to get. And so this is just a worksheet. I'll work through it very, very quickly with you to look at it. But this gives you an idea. Basically, if you want to just be generalized, if a couple, and in this particular illustration I'm going to give, this is a couple in which the husband dies, because that's more likely. Okay, so and often, but not always, the husband is the chief bread earner in the home. So let's say in this case we had a husband and wife, and the husband could pass away. So how much insurance should the family cover under that scenario? That's what this worksheet would help you with. I'm not going to do much with this. I want you to, if you want to, go ahead and work through these numbers and come out with what you think you might need. But basically is this, you need to look at the general picture, the big picture. If my spouse was gone, how much money would I need to carry on my life? Okay? How much to pay my mortgages and my debts? If you have children in the home, what is it going to cost to educate them, take care of them, help them raise up? All those kinds of things. So if the spouse was gone, what kind of money would you need to pay for your expenses in life? And that should be covered then. After everything else is added up and subtracted, that should be covered by life insurance. That's what life insurance is for. Life insurance shouldn't be anyway designed to be for life, if you live long. You shouldn't have life insurance when you're 85. I mean, why would you have that? It'd be unusual circumstances, but unless you have a bunch of debts you don't want to leave to your kids. But then maybe you do want to leave it to the kids, so then that works out for you. But normally you don't. You get life insurance as long as you need it. And that's usually when you're younger. You have children in the home, you have mortgages, you have things to pay for. When those things are taken care of, then you may not need life insurance at all. But this helps you add up all those things quickly. The first sheet, what is your income right now? So assuming your income is paying your bills and taking care of you adequately, what is that income? And then what payments no longer required. So if the husband passes away, there are certain expenses that you would not need to pay any longer. So those are lined out there, and you can look at those, add up the lines, so you can follow that. but you're going to have some income after the husband passes away. If you have children in the home, you have Social Security, hopefully. I mean, most everybody does. And Social Security is quite generous for children in the home. So it's not just a benefit for retirement and so forth. It is a very, very generous benefit for children in the home. And in many cases, it can sustain a home for several years. At age 17 or 18, those benefits disappear, but up until then, the benefits are there. So then what income can the wife make? What other retirement plans or investments do you have? This shows you what money you have on hand to apply to your lifestyle. On the back, you have lump sum requirements. So there are certain things that need to be paid for at the death of a spouse. There might be some debt repayment that needs to be taken care of. Funeral costs. Funerals are getting very expensive now. So the average funeral, I believe, if you have a burial, this is not our discussion today, but if you have a burial, the average is around $15,000. So it's a little less if you're going to get cremated, which is why cremations are taking up about half of all burials now, because they're more like maybe you might be able to get it under 10,000 if you do a cremation. There's different factors there, but it's very expensive to die these days. So just find a plot in the backyard and don't tell the neighbors, and you can take care of that pretty well, right? Anyway, so that's something to keep in mind. And the funerals homes want their money up front, so keep that in mind too. They don't really like the idea, well, I'll pay you when money comes in. You probably have to pay it up front. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Estate taxes, usually there are not a lot there unless you're very wealthy. This is inheritance tax. Unless you're worth $5 or $10 million, you don't have to worry about that. If you have 5 or 10 million, you don't have to worry about it either. So that's probably not too much to worry about. You do have the educational costs, though. You got children to raise, perhaps. You got a lot of expenses coming up in the future. Those things need to be estimated as best you can, so that goes on down. Then you have assets that are available, like real estates and stocks and bonds and savings. When you're done with this, you should be able to have a pretty good idea of what you're going to need. So then you can then make a logical, reasonable decision on how much insurance you need. So this is just a worksheet. So I just want to, it's not something I want to deal with a lot tonight. Work through it. Be glad to talk to you about this more. Jim would be glad to talk to you about that and see what you might have. Yeah.
I got maybe a silly question, but as far as 401k goes, like retirement accounts, like let's say I died, but I was below the 59-year mark, would Christy have access to the 401k because I died?
She does, but it would be under the same
It's penalized?
penalization until a certain age usually. There are some exceptions that the government gives, but I wouldn't count on that. Yeah.
I know this doesn't really get talked about that often, but people used to be able to take out long-term care insurance policies, and now I've noticed with my parents, the person that I'm with, her parents, they can't even afford the policy to begin with, and it's like, I guess at that point, would underneath here, would it fall underneath like life insurance in that way?
Yeah, that would be under the life insurance type thing. The thing with long-term care, you can't wait till you almost need it to get it. So if you want to have long-term care, and that's something that everybody has to decide for themselves, you're going to have to get a reasonable policy, premium policy. You're going to have to start young. So, but if you wait till you're 60, and you can probably get it, but the premiums are going to be outrageous. So you got to start earlier if you want to do that. The other option is to save money in some other form of investment for that. But and if you're doing the long-term care, look at the fine print very carefully. What does it actually pay? How long does it pay? That type of thing. So yeah.
You're going to hear people that got it 25 years ago, and the policies then, many of them were spectacular. They were wonderful. That is not the case.
Yeah, they've learned the lessons, haven't they?
Absolutely. A lot of the insurance companies just went south on it. So you've got to really look at it. So you may get some advice. It's a wonderful thing. It was not so much.
Not as much as it was. And that's because people are living longer now. So, as I get around visiting people in the church that are in the long-term care facilities and so forth, those didn't exist back in the day. I mean, those are very nice. It's wonderful to have those, but they cost money. And some of these people might live there for 15, 20 years. And then that's, that's different. Now, a nursing home, keep in mind, a nursing home is much more expensive than what do you call it? Assisted living. A nursing home would be at least double assisted living. And there's different rules on that. My sister right now is in a nursing home. She had a very bad spell of illnesses, and has been in a nursing home for going on 2 months now. If you leave a hospital and go to a nursing home, Medicare will pay for, I think, 3 months. Then after that, you're pretty much on your own. So her husband is going to drag her out of there with a truck at the end of 3 months, no matter what he says. So hopefully she'll be ready to go. But at that point, you're talking $10,000, $12,000 a month. Many times on these nursing home things, that's pretty rough. So, but there's only, in our whole church, I don't think we have anybody in a nursing home at this point except one person who just went in for hopefully short term, Mrs. Ballinger. But there are several people in the long-term care. Okay, so that's. I'm going to leave that now. I'm going to go back to investments for a while and talk about some things here. It's been suggested that the main time when you're accumulating money is when you're young. I'm sorry. Most people don't accumulate a lot of money when they're young, ages 20 to 40 or whatever, because they have so many other things to pay for, so many other expenses in front of them. And, I got this over here. And so most people begin probably accumulating more after they're 40, but the earlier the better. That's something we said early on in this class, and I'm going to try to prove that to you tonight a little bit. The sooner you start, the better off you are in trying to put some money away. Even if it's a little amount, just a small amount, the sooner the better. Teenage years is not too soon to start. If you get, as a teenager, you get gifts from your grandparents or whatever else, instead of go out and blowing it on whatever, start putting it in your own investment account, and you'll be amazed how that will grow over time. Now, I found something in my little notes as I was going through here that were clipped in 1992. Okay, so it's a little dated, but this I've always thought about this thing ever since I read it, and glad I found it. And these are the reasons year by year, going back to the Great Depression, why you shouldn't invest this year, all the way back to the Great Depression. So I've got it from 34 up to 91. And I'm just going to read a few of them. 34, the Great Depression. 35, the Spanish Civil War. 36, the economy is still struggling. 37, a recession. 38, war in Europe. 39, war in Europe. 40, France falls. 41, Pearl Harbor. And it goes right on down the line. 46, the Dow Jones tops 200. Market is too high. 48, Berlin blockade. 49, USSR explodes the atomic bomb. 50, the Korean War. Going down. 1954, the Dow tops 300. Market too high. Suez Canal crisis in 56. Recession in 58. Castro takes over Cuba in 59. USS downs the U-2 spy planes in 60. Going right on down, the Cuban Missile Crisis in 62. Civil rights marches in 65. Vietnam War in 66 on through 73. And the market is too high in 68. And then energy crisis in 73, blah, 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 right on down the line. Interest rates too high in 1980, recession in 1981, the worst recession in 40 years, a debt crisis in 82. The market hits a record high, too high. The Dow nears 2000 in 1986, market too high, the crash in 87, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so these are all the reasons why you should never invest in the stock market, okay? So that's one thing. But then, I have another little story. You're going to like this. This is a story about the late bird and the early bird. The late bird decided that he was not going to invest any money, to really researched it, and then eventually he'll put some money in. So he waited 10 years to put money in to just the right moment, and he put it in at the right time. The early bird, however, decided that they'd go ahead and put $2,000 a year away for just 10 years, just $2,000, And every year, the early bird put money away at the very worst time in the stock market, at the very high point of the stock market. So people often think, well, I gotta wait till the market comes down before I invest. This poor early bird invested at the very worst time every year for 10 years. The late bird, on the other hand, began to invest his money some years later, and he invested 10 years later, and he invested his money for 20 years at the very lowest point of the stock market every year. Very perfect time to invest. At the end of the time, when the two came together at the same time, the late bird had invested $40,000 in the market and had $250,000. The early bird had only invested $20,000, and he had $256,000. No, wait a minute. No, I can't read my own thing here. He had $300,000. The early bird made 1,220% investment gain. The late bird, 540%. Remember, this person, the one that made the most, put the money in the market at the wrong time every year. The one that made the least put the money in the market at the right time every year. What did they do differently? The early bird started earlier. He started at 20 years old, invested for 10 years, and never did it again. And at the age 65, I believe on this diagram, they had $250,000. Well, the other one didn't do that. So the point is, if you want to think you can time the market and that you have to hit just the right spot to do it, and you got to get out at just the right spot, you're probably not going to do that, and you don't need to. If you are a steady investor, just putting a little money away over time for a long period of time and the right investments, you should do fine. That's been the story of the investment world in America forever. So I encourage that for you to think about. Don't try to time the market. Don't try to think you're going to outsmart everybody else. You're probably not. Okay, so that's just a little illustration or two that might prime your pump a little bit. Let's look at some things here. We're going to be looking at more specific investments next time. This time, though, we're going to be looking at the build up to it. So let's have an accumulation strategy 4-step plan. So before you ever think about putting any money in investments, you got to do a few things. First of all, eliminate all credit card and consumer debt. So it makes no sense to be putting money into some investment to try to make money, whether it's a CD for 5% or a stock market with your hope of 12%. It makes no sense to do that when you're paying 18, 25% in credit card debt. So you need to be paying off your credit cards, your consumer debts. These are the things with the big interest they're charging you. Get rid of those things before you start being serious about putting money aside in investments. Number 2, this is very important. We haven't talked about this too much yet. Everybody needs an emergency fund. So here's what happens to a lot of people. They put away a little money, and they're headed on the right direction, and then the furnace goes out, or the transmission blows up, or whatever else. And now they have to rob from their investments in order to pay those bills. Or worse, they have to go to their credit card company or credit card and charge it. And then they're back to zero and worse because they could not pay the bill. So in order to stop that from happening, one of the very first things you should be doing as you set aside funds is to set aside money in an emergency fund. Now this money is money that becomes your bank. If you have something goes wrong in your house, you turn to the emergency fund to pay for it. You don't go to the bank, you don't go to your credit cards, you go to your emergency fund. And so you put that aside. You build that money up until before you start getting serious about any kind of investments. And a lot of people never get to that stage because they never do this, and they really need to do that. So the question is, how much should you have in an emergency fund? And of course, you get different answers from different people, but the minimum suggestion is 3 months of living expenses. Okay, at least 3 months of living expenses. Better off 6 months. So if it costs you $10,000 a month to live, depending on your circumstance, you need to have at least $30,000 set aside to tap in case you needed it and something went wrong. Another thing that goes into this too is, can you see down the horizon a little bit at some expenses that might be yours coming up? Okay, so for example, you got a house and you know your roof is 23 years old and you know you're going to have to replace that roof within 2 or 3 years. That's going to be, depending on your house, $15,000 to $30,000. Okay, that money should be set aside. If you got a brand new roof, you don't have to worry about that one. Okay, how about your HVAC system? Is it new or is it ancient? Because that's going to be another $10,000 to replace your HVAC system or more, depending on your house. If it's old and could go out, do you have the funds to pay for that? How about your cars? You got a 2023 Toyota. Well, that should last into the millennium, right? At least Cliff thinks so, right? The Toyotas. If you've got a 1991 Buick, you better start saving, because it's probably not going to last. You got it along that far. That's really good, but not going to last forever. Are you going to have the money to pay for a new vehicle? Well, we've already talked about earlier. The biggest waste of money in America is cars. People waste so much money on cars. Our goal is to pay cash for cars, so that should be one of your goals in front of you. But you need the emergency fund. Where do you put the emergency fund? Probably your best bet is in a mutual fund money market, where you can gain right now about 5%, closing in on 5%. So you're getting money. Don't just put it in a bank that pays 0, because why do that when you can gain some money? So that's wise to just put money in some kind of a mutual fund money market. Make sure it's available. Make sure it's liquid. You can get to it if you have to. So don't tie it up in a 12-year CD that you can't get to without a penalty. Keep it in something that you can get to real quickly. So emergency fund, that's your first step. After you eliminate debt, your next step is have an emergency fund of the money that you need in case something goes wrong. Yeah.
Can I offer a suggestion from experience?
Uh-huh.
We've been banking with the same bank for 20 years, and one of Marion's coworkers banks with the same bank, has for 20 years. And we had a savings account, or either regular savings or a checking account at 4% interest. The coworker had it at 0.01 interest. The point being, you need to pay attention to what your bank is giving you or not, and pester them if they're not, or talk to other people.
Or change, move it.
Or move it.
Yeah, move it.
Because
Okay.
they don't automatically give you the best rate.
No, so even if you're in mutual funds, for example, or something like Schwab or something like that, so you have two different things. You got a money market account where you're getting close to 5%, but you also have just a cash account which pays almost nothing. If you're not careful, you got all your money in the nothing account when you could be over here making some money. So those little things add up over time. Your goal is this emergency fund is going to hang around. You're not going to need it for a while, but if you do need it, it's there. And you can pay your own bills that way. You don't have to borrow from something else. And then after you spend $10,000 to fix your transmission, you then reload up your emergency fund and keep that in good shape. Okay, that's a good example. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, Carol?
That emergency fund is so important.
Yes.
You know, when Cliff had his surgery and we found out he was gonna be off for 6 months, it was shocking, shocking, you know? And you get disability?
Disability,
It was a third of what his normal
Right,
pay was.
right.
And so we just tightened things up as much as we could and found, like that verse, you know, you don't trust in your riches, but you trust in God who
Right.
gives everything
Yeah,
for you to enjoy.
right.
And that's really there. We were happy in that 6 months, but we didn't have money to go out to eat or buy clothes, or, you know, we're just gonna buy gas and food.
Okay.
You know,
So-
and you can live like that,
Yeah. So
and you can be happy.
at least you were. I don't know about Cliff. Okay. So this really helped, because you don't know the future, right? We don't know when we get sick or can't go back to work, whatever, for a while. So that, or lose your job. You know, those things happen. Yes.
A lot of times what happens too is that they don't, I guess, they didn't talk about, sometimes when a child has to step out of the workforce to help take care of their ailing parent.
Uh-huh.
That seems to be happening in a lot of my work now,
Does it?
you know.
Yeah, that can happen, yeah. Okay, another one then is set up a separate accounts for major purchases. So here's another thing. You need a new car in 5 years. So rather than simply having all your money in one account, you may want to set aside in a separate account, or at least in a separate accounting system, money that you're putting away every month for that new car. Now, we do this exact same thing here at the church. So if you look at our financial picture, we're going to come out our annual report in a couple months, and you'll look at the different categories we have. So we have a category for HVAC systems, because one of these big ones go out is 25 grand. All right? So we're not going to wait till that happens and have to drain some of our other funds. So we put aside a couple $1,000s every month into an HVAC fund. Not very romantic, but we'll stay warm. Okay? So we got money we put aside every month for vans. So we just purchased a new van just recently. We had a big hunk of that money already saved for over several years of saving it up. So we have various categories where we're saving for the future, and then when something happens, you're ready. So if you're going to get a new car, you're going to do that, or you got kids going to college or whatever, start stockpiling funds, perhaps in a different account altogether. Maybe a different bank, a different system, different investment, or at least do it in an accounting system so you know what money you have available for that. But that's one of your goals. We looked at goals a few weeks ago. What are your big long-term goals that you want to save for? Okay, and then invest for the long-range goals. Invest for long-range goals. So plan for the future. And one of the important things here is after you've completed, eliminated the debt, emergency fund, you're investing for long range, you're looking down the line, and that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of today. So it's long range goals. Most people, I'll jump in here on this now. Most people, no matter what they are investing in, do not make money. And the reason they don't make money is because they're jumping in and out of investments. They're not content to be long-range investors. They're following some trends or something, and they also rob their own accounts. They see decent money in some investment or something they've set aside, and they can't resist, and they go in there and they take it and do something else with it. I've known many people that has a 401k that's been set aside at work and is built up to $50,000, $100,000. They have never saved money in their life. And suddenly they get the sheet at the end of the year. I've got $100,000 in here. So they go out and they buy a bigger house, taking money out of their 401k. That is a bad choice. 401k is for retirement. That is not money to be used for something else. So you have categories of how you want to use it. And that keeps you from stealing from your own self and hurting yourself down the line. Yeah, Scott?
Should there be another category in there too? Is I've set up an account for taxes and insurance, put that aside. I used to have an escrow, but now at the point where I'm just paying out of pocket.
You're talking about property tax now?
Yeah, property tax.
Yeah, you can do that. Those are shorter term goals,
Right.
not the long term. But you know that your real estate tax is going to come due in June.
Right.
Do you have the $4,000 or whatever to pay that? If not, so every month you put aside $400.
Yeah,
And,
basically
yeah.
I put aside what I did that,
Yeah.
now I got the mortgage paid off. I pay that in a certain account to
Yeah.
cover that.
Okay, that's a good plan. Let's talk about risk a little bit. There's different types of risk. A lot of times people just simply say, well, the big question is the stock market riskier than the interest savings accounts? But you have to ask what kind of risk are you talking about? So there's different kinds of risk. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but business risk, you start a business. Most small businesses go under, so keep that in mind, because I know nobody ever started a small business that they thought would fail. But I think somewhere in the neighborhood, 70, 80% of all small businesses fail within the first 5 years. So that's a risk, right? If you really want to get wealthy, start your own company, start your own business. That's the best way to make a lot of money. It's also the best way to go bankrupt. So don't plan necessarily on being the one that got it really wealthy. The Elon Musks are exceptions, right? The financial risk, so you have, that goes along with the market risk here. So as you put your money in various things, there's going to be a certain amount of risk. Interest rate risk, purchasing power risk. So for example, if you've got your money in a money market or a CD at 4%, okay, CDs at 4% are pretty common. Not locally, you probably can't go down to most local banks here and get that, but you can get them on online banks all day long, okay, maybe even higher than that. So you got a 4% CD, and that's risk-free. It's covered by the government. If you're not going to lose any money, no risk there, right? But if inflation is 5%, then you're losing money every year because inflation is higher than your savings is coming in. Plus, thank you, Mr. Government, they will tax you on the money you're getting from your CD. So now you're actually making about 3% overall. So you're losing 2% a year on your absolutely risk-free CD. Does that make sense? So that isn't risk-free. You're losing purchasing power every year on something like that. Does that mean you can't invest in a CD? I didn't say that, and we'll look at any specific investments. Somebody's going to have to teach me how to say specific investments next week, and CDs is one of them, and it depends on your age and your goals and so forth. It's one of the options that we have, but it's not risk-free. Okay. On the other hand, the bonds in the stock market have a more immediate risk, right? So you invest in Apple, and Apple may go down. So that's a risk. A mutual fund may go down, okay, or it may go up. So you got this risk thing. But overall, over the period, the history of the stock market going back into the 1800s, is that your investment will return somewhere around 10% a year on the long haul. So that will beat inflation. Matter of fact, the stock market beats almost any investment over the long haul. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but over the long haul, it does. And sometimes it's very lucrative. The last 2 years, if you're in a stock market, the last 2 years, you've gained about 50% if you had them in the right kind of investment. That's a lot of money. It's interesting, though. I just read a thing online just last week that you know how these blurbs, they come in on your internet feed to get you to read it. So Warren Buffett, if you know who Warren Buffett is, you're ahead of the game. The greatest investor ever lived, probably. He's 90-some years old now, still the wisdom of this guy, financially. Warren Buffett says, take your money out of all your stock market investments and go away for 5 years. And that doesn't sound like Warren Buffett, because I have studied him some. That doesn't sound like him at all. So I went back in and I read the article. They got me. They tricked me. I read the article. Warren Buffett did say something like that on an offhanded remark 5 years ago. What would have happened if he had actually done that and you and I had done that? The stock market has boomed since that time. And so he didn't do that, but this article said that. So I had to be very careful with some of these things and what people are saying. But anyway, this is the risk. Now here's one more thing I want to talk about, though. Risk tolerance. Where should you put your money? And the question is, what is your risk tolerance? How much risk can you live with? Okay? And if you can't, and here's the easiest test I know. If you can't sleep at night, don't invest in it. If it keeps you awake, don't invest in it, because that's not worth it. So many years ago, a fellow in our church was wanting to invest money for the future. He was a little bit older guy, getting retirement age, and so I got him involved in some very solid mutual funds. He called me up every day. Said, I heard so-and-so said the stock market is going to completely tank and I'm going to lose everything. And so he's, number 2 clue, don't listen to the TV or radio or all the pundits. Buy good investments, stay with him, but this guy could not literally sleep at night, and he wasn't helping me any either. So I said, get out. Well, he lost a fortune, ultimately, but he did die happy in his trailer on the road somewhere, I think. I lost track of him. He quit calling me. But I think he died happy. He just died a little more poor. Yeah.
So how does this fit with the biblical command to be anxious for nothing?
Well, don't be. Yeah. So
Okay,
don't.
but that
Yeah.
doesn't answer the question about risk tolerance.
Well, it does because don't.
Any financial advisor is going to ask you what your tolerance for risk is. So as a Christian, should it be different than for a non-believer?
I think so. I think we're in the passage about not being anxious. We did. Here's the theory I go by. We do the best we can with what the Lord has given us. Okay, and then if it goes well, great. I'll use it for His glory. If it doesn't do well, God is God and He's in charge, and I can live with that. And that therefore I'm not anxious about that. So if I lose half my money next year in the stock market, and I've done the best I can live with that. I'm not going to be anxious about it. But I'm not going to be foolish either. And I'm not going to put it in things I don't understand or that are not wise.
I was just gonna say, like, if you're counseling someone, right, if they've invested in something like this man you're just talking about,
Yeah.
that's sound, then it's maybe working on your heart not to be anxious. There are some investments that maybe you should feel a little anxious about.
Yeah.
Right, they're risky.
Risky. And so don't put yourself through that unnecessarily. Don't hang yourself out there and hope God rescues you. That's not a biblical principle. Okay, so that's the risk tolerance. So look at your own life. If you're comfortable with what I just said, you're going to do the best you can. If it doesn't go well, that's in the Lord's hands. But I'm not going to do something unnecessarily risky or something I can't live with anyway. Mike?
Some of that has not to do with necessarily anxiety, but the risk tolerance based on your life circumstances.
Yes.
If I lost half my investments next year, I'd be okay, but if I were on the brink of retirement, I can't lose half of my investments at
Right.
that point.
And when we get later on in our studies together, we get to the retirement section. A retirement person's portfolio will look differently than a 20-year-old's or a 30-year-old's. Yeah, because you can't recover. At 80 years old, you can't recover if you lost half your investments. That's a good point. Yeah, Scott?
Doesn't this overlap with stewardship too? The whole principle of this is God's money.
Yeah, it's God's
You're
money.
stewards of it, so to be a good steward, you've got to think about things as such as this.
Yeah. So if you lose a lot of your money, at first you start saying, well, Lord, that's your money, Lord. You're losing your money. You want to lose your money? You know, you can talk to God about that. But it doesn't necessarily work out in your head so well. So, but yeah, exactly. We're not owners, we're stewards of what God has given us. Bob?
And it also goes along with how Scripture teaches us to have several advisors or
Yeah.
people to counsel with, to be good stewards of what God has given us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, let's go on to a little bit more diversification. There's a lot of different places to put money. Okay, so you have liquid accounts like money markets and savings accounts and cash. So I don't recommend you have a whole lot of cash hanging around, but it might not be a bad idea to have some. Put it in a safe place where it won't get burned up or whatever, or stolen easily. But something may come up and you need cash for a while. You get some circumstance. So a little cash, liquid stuff you can get to immediately, write a check, whatever else. Do a debit card. So you have some of that. The growth, you have some growth. You want some things that are growing for you, such as money, stock markets and so forth. Non-liquid things would be things that, these would be things that are not easily tapped into, but you might want to do them as a diversity. For example, I'm asked quite often about gold and silver. Should I invest in gold and silver? Well, there's been times when gold and silver have been very good investments, and you might want to take a small amount to diversify. I recommend when people ask me that who really want to do it, don't put over 5% of your money into it. Don't put a whole bunch in there, but you might want to put some there. It used to be gold was an inflation hedge, and if everything else blew up, you could have enough gold to go down and buy groceries. Okay, so let's say that actually happened, and you had a kugel rand, which is worth now $30,000 because the world blew up, and you go down to buy bread. Do you think the cashier's gonna be able to cash that thing? That may not work out quite the way you wanted it to work. You might wanna think about that. But if you wanna do something like that, collectibles is another thing. A lot of people put money into collectibles with the idea that, they can sell those things at a profit. Most of the time, that doesn't work. Okay, most of the time, your gun collection, your baseball card collection, whatever else you've got is not gonna be worth anything near what you think it's gonna be worth when you wanna sell it. But you can, if that's what you wanna do, that's something to think about. Then there's real estate, primarily your home. So having your own house is important, as a part of your investments. Rental houses, if you wanna do that as well. So these are some of the places that you could diversify. Apparently, I started something back in the back. So I'm gonna have to go on, let's just real quick.
So, the hard thing about real estate is some areas of the country it's cheaper to rent than to own.
Yeah, there's issues, so I'm not getting into all that at this point, and there's different times in life when you'd be better off renting. But this is just options, okay? Okay, why do most people fail? Okay, let me give you some. This one investment guru said, in my 30 years of experience in the financial field, I have learned that 90% of all investors investing in anything make no money over a 10-year period. And that's kind of sad, isn't it? Here's why he said that happens. Investors have no financial goals. They really don't have any objections in front of them. Investors do not understand the laws of compound growth. As we talked about that earlier, compounding growth is the key to growth in finances. Number 3, investors follow complex investment strategies. So you got this guru or somebody you're following telling you this complex, very complex system to follow, and you don't understand anything about it. Stay away from that. I think I got another one kind of like that. Investors are greedy, and so they see they made some money and they take profits when they shouldn't. Investors are influenced by and act upon what they read in the financial press. Probably the worst thing you can do is listen to financial people, because you're going to hear something different from 20 people in the same day, and you're going to get spooked by that. And by the way, most of them don't even know any more than you do, quite frankly. If you go back to the beginning of 2022 and listen to the forecast of the greatest investors in America of what money was going to be made in 2022, most of them said you're not going to make anything this year. It's going to be a bad year. Then it came to 2023, and the same people said you're not going to make anything in 23. It's going to be a bad year. So 2 years in a row, they're totally wrong. Why should you listen to them now? Right? They've messed it up before. So why should you listen to them now? Most of these people, even the best of them, don't have that much more insight than you do. You might do better than they do in some cases. But don't knee jerk over things you hear in the press and on the internet and so forth, and causes you to change your plans if you have good plans. Investors rely on gurus and brokers for investment advice. To some degree, that's helpful. But once again, and I'll get to this again later, is all these different investors, these mutual funds. We're going to talk about mutual funds next week. The mutual funds, which are ran by the very best investors in the world, rarely do better than the index funds, which simply follow what the market is doing. And that was discovered a number of years ago by Vanguard. Vanguard started putting out these index funds. Don't worry about what all these gurus are saying. Invest in the market itself, and you normally will do better than they will. So that's just telling you that you can get advice, and it could be helpful, but be very careful. Number 7, investors chase investments acting emotionally rather than rationally. So when the stock market dips tomorrow, goes down 2%, a lot of people run for the doors because they're emotionally concerned. And that, if you have good investments, that's not a good plan. Okay.
Gary,
Yeah.
we getting into this, are there economic indicators like that can give you a warning that are true?
It's real hard to say, Carol, because there are indicators, but those are not infallible, and they're going to be read differently by different people. So last week, on Friday, I think it was, we came out with a report of a wonderful workers report, job report. More jobs were created than all the brilliant people expected, and the unemployment rate went down more than they expected. So what happened? The stock market tanked. More jobs, more people working, less unemployment stuff going out, and the stock market, poof. Why? Well, because the people in the stock market are all fixated right now on interest rates. They want interest rates to go down. But during all the time when the interest rates were going up, or with the Fed over the last several years before now, the stock market went up. Now it's coming down slowly, and they're not happy about that. The issue is the investment world is never happy. And there's a thing in the wisdom of the financial world is the stock market climbs a wall of worry. Unless people are worried, it doesn't go up. So there's always something to be upset about, always something's going to go wrong, and there's no infallible way to know that. We do know in the long term, the stock market is always long-term gone up.
We also don't always know the angle they have for why they're wanting to call what they're doing. Like all of our favorite conservative commentators consistently are talking about the next Great Depression because they're selling gold.
Yeah.
Or or food, dried food, and
Okay.
it's always followed by a commercial.
Yeah.
And so you can't, last year I got sucked into one of those articles about the guy who supposedly correctly called it 2008.
And he might have.
He did because I Googled him and he calls it every year.
Ah. Eventually, you're going to be right. Yeah, that's, be careful. And it is what bothers me a lot. So a lot of you follow Babylon Bee. That's a fun place. But they've gone crazy recently. Now they're selling food because the Great Recession is going to come, and you're going to be hiding out in your basement and you need their food. They got it packaged and ready to go at 10 times the value of the food. That really upsets me that people do things like that. But that's what you're going to have. So you got people, now they're covering themselves. They're working for different ones. We don't know the future. So the thing is that we'll look at next time is find good investments. Slowly but surely build up those investments over time and stay with them unless they're not a good investment anymore. All right? So that's the key. Now, some investments are not good. So you got to learn that. So I'll go back I got about a minute here, so I'll go back to, so I listened, years ago, the guy who got me involved in thinking more about these kinds of things, really got me interested, was a good Christian man. He used to go to our church and moved away. He studied the stock market every day, all the time. He made a lot of money over time. But he was telling me, he was here one year, and he's telling me, here's a stock you just got to get into. It is down, and it's going to go up. Buy Kmart. And I did. I put, at that point, a considerable amount of my money in it. And you know where Kmart is today? No, I don't either. It's gone. Yeah. And so that was the only stock I've ever bought that I totally lost every dime. Okay? Now, if I put all my money in Kmart, I would probably be working for Walmart. So we'll talk about diversification even in the stock market. But I listened to a man I respected who made a lot of money, but even the best aren't always right. So be very careful with that. Bob?
I did something like that when I was in my 20s. I wanted to own some stock. I had none, and I bought $100 worth of Ozark. And we know where Ozark is.
$100 is not going to kill you.
People in here never heard of it.
Yeah. But if you're going to buy something like that, buy $100 worth. So you got a good story and you didn't lose much money, right? Yeah. Yeah, next Apple could be that, and you'll see that on the internet all the time. The next Apple, the next Amazon, this is it. You'll make $1 trillion by 3 years from now. Not likely. Somebody is selling a product. So we don't want to get caught up in that. That's not investing. So we'll look at that next time. Now, next week we have small groups, so we're not going to be doing this. And then we'll pick it up later on. Okay? All right.